But you think
So
fair trade doesn't kick into um, the sustainable production equations? Because there's also a lot of customers, asking, hey, do you have any fair trade practices? And, one of, like, I give you an example. So even like, for example, when we manufacture our material in the factories as well, one of the things that the brands will ask is that, oh, does the factory has any fair trade certificate, la 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 la. But again, you are also spot on, because when consumers are buying for clothing, it's so true that they look at price and style. They don't immediately think. So what do you like? I mean, with these gaps, my curiosity lays in is that, do you think the brands are trying to chase off perfectionists? Like, I mean, obviously, if you ask, can we actually make fashion completely 100% sustainable, right? Both you and I've been in the industry for quite some time. We know the reality is like not possible, but we can try to make it as sustainable as possible, right? But at the same time, when it comes down to fair trade and all this accreditation, do you think these small brands are asking too much but not able to, the well, I wouldn't say delivered, but they're asking too much. But they're asking too much about something that, perhaps consumer, that they don't even care as much.
yes, so I want to clarify quickly. I think that when I'm talking about consumers and stuff, I'm talking about the end consumer. But I think that customers are probably the brands. Right? So I think that when brands are asking from suppliers for accreditation is because I think that, especially when they're young brands, I think that they're so afraid of not making it into the market and making sales because of this one objection someone asked them, and so they are so reactive rather than responsive. And I think that there's a difference, because if you're reactive, if I say to you as a consumer, hey, do you have an accreditation? And I don't, or you don't as a brand, you will start, well, no, but and you lose your confidence. You probably end up not getting that sale, and then you throw the problem to your factory or to your team. We need to change our factory. We need to go with someone who's accredited because I lost the sale, etc. But I think that if actually, and that's one thing that I often talk to brands. I say to them, the minute you launch, you're no longer a designer. You're no longer about just creativity. Creativity squeezes to like 5-10%. You become a media house, your marketing powerhouse. You have to, marketing becomes your number one activity, and they have to learn how to market. And as part of marketing, there's this whole, they need to study human psychology and overcome these obstacles. So knowing what I know now, if someone said to me, hey, do you have an accreditation? I would say, well, which accreditation exactly are you looking for? Why is it important for you? So no, my factory doesn't have this particular accreditation because it's very expensive to get, but they have exactly all the processes in place. And I would be able to evidence it to them because I would have, made sure that I have some information on my website, pictures, etc., etc. I would be proud of the factory. And I would prompt them with, well, so what's more important for you, that, you buy from someone who has the accreditation, but the price and the product is not important to you, or what's more important? Because if it's price and product, here it is, and I would probably get the sale and get more sales by knowing how to address these customers and their psychology than just being reactive and saying, oh my God, we don't have the accreditation. Quick, change factory. Let's start for a new one, etc. So I don't know if this answered your question.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. I mean, that's really like, I guess, a transition in terms of like perspective changes. I mean, sometimes like it could have been that, we always speak to a lot of sustainable fashion brand, and, by all means, I would be 100% supportive of it. But I also tend to see, being in the industry, I see the dilemma of both sides. You ask for so much, but then you don't want to pay for so much. How do you supposed to justify, like, but again, I've also asked some of our interview guests as well, if sustainable fashion is really exist, that, like, to serve people who have more money or not. Can we make sustainable fashion a mass fashion instead of just like high expensive, more expensive pieces? But in between, there's so many little layers, like, the certification that people have to pay for, not only in the factory but also in the dye, or maybe in the fabric as well. And then in between, maybe even brand, they have to apply for, let's say, Ecotex green label, something like that. all of these are all costs. But with that, with all these costs on top of it, if you want to make sustainable fashion matching the same mass market price, these costs are the one that the reason why they are not able to meet the same kind of like, you know, like benchmark in terms of pricing. So it's just a bit of a dilemma that I always see, and I'm very interested in how people think about it in the industry. So another, from another perspective, I said that from the product development standpoint, what do you recommend?
Can I just go back to your previous point and say that I don't think that sustainability 100% is possible. We just all have to try to be more sustainable. And as our recent conversation, your interview for my podcast taught me so many things. One of the real, mind-blown moment was when you told me about the blending of materials, about thinking about the end of the product, when you're even designing. And I think that if more people knew that, they would automatically be more sustainable. And Rome wasn't built in a day, little by little. So if we incorporate these practices, think about the type of blends, think about how is this product going to be recycled, will it be biodegradable, blah, 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 etc., then automatically brands will be more sustainable. And if you then add the layer of, testing your product, making sure that your messaging is correct, that, you focus on your marketing, testing your product with the target market, then you would be designing products that will sell rather than sit unsold. And then we wonder what to do with them, and send them to a landfill, to Oxfam, who sends them to Africa, who even Africa doesn't want our unwanted products anymore, right?
So true. So true.
So yeah, I think that's where I see sustainability. So I think it's absolutely possible.
Yeah.
We just need to educate ourselves and be clear, what am I doing, where I am at the moment, I'm here. Well, if I start thinking with the end in mind, going backwards, you make different choices.
Yeah. Speaking of which, you're talking about design and circularity. Do you see a lot of brands are actually adopting this so far, like the early startup brands that you are working with? Or do you see that this is something still like, a bit far stretch, maybe like, brands a little bit more established, then think about design and circularity?
Well, if you could ask me like a few weeks ago, I would have probably said, yes, I see brands, adopting. But since our conversation where I learned so much about recycling, my answer now is no. I see a lot of brands talking about it, but I don't think the fundamentals. And I don't think that, most creative, particularly creatives, the ones who, so you have two types of brand founders, someone who is not a creative, but who has a mission, and the brand is a vehicle for accomplishing that bigger mission. And you have the creatives who are unemployable because they don't want to design something cheap. They want to design their, fantasy creations. This type of brands, the fantasy creation, let's say, or the super creative, they're not thinking, will the fabric, be able to be recycled easily? What will happen at the end of life? They just want to, look for the perfect material, and whatever it is, as long as it fits, they want to use it. And so I think that brands talk about it, but I don't think they understand what it means. And therefore my answer is no, I don't see brands designing with circularity.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so if you say, for example, if brands start thinking about it, let's say maybe there's not that many brands or young brands are thinking about design and circularity. From your standpoint in productions and manufacturing, and now we had the conversation about recycling, what do you recommend brands should adopt in design in circularity when it comes down to the sustainable practice in the supply chain? What do you think some of the key things that they should think about, like, from a designing or from a, development standpoint?
Well, so I think that, it's not that I don't think there's an easy answer, because I think fashion is so complex, and, and the goals we want to achieve and the aspirations we have as brands and creatives, etc., are so complex and sometimes out of our hands. But in an ideal world, what I think should happen, given the conversations that are being had at this point of time about, the climate, environment, sustainability, etc., is that I think that everyone should start with the end in mind. So if you're talking about sustainability, what does that mean? So first of all, how do you want your product, if one day when it cannot be used anymore, if it was to end in the landfill, will it biodegrade? So therefore, what does that mean? What product are you using? What's the material? What are the fibers? Are they all biodegradable? You've taught me that less blends is better than more. So, you know, if you have 4, can you find your material in 3? Is the 4th one necessary? In order for you to sell more, you know, who are you working with? You know, is the design adapted for you to get the right price point so that you can make a margin and people are happy with this? When people buy it, if you're, you know, if you want to be sustainable and jump on the bandwagon of repair, reuse, and that kind of stuff, who's going to do this? Repair, you know, when they send it to you. So everything is kind of like a chicken and egg. You know, if you make one choice, you have to then think, what are the steps backward, you know, going back and set systems. So I don't think it's an easy solution, but I think step by step, people, if they know what their vision is, they can create milestones for themselves and little by little start achieving one step at a time. So maybe this year we just, you know, relook at our fabrics and we use less fabrics, make sure that they're biodegradable, etc. Next year we look at our design, you know, and our manufacturing, for example. The year after we look at, you know, if we want to offer repair service, what does that mean? Shall we find some ladies, out workers that we can send to them, etc. So I think it's a step-by-step approach.
That comes to my last question for our interview today. What advice would you give to new brands that they want to start this, like they want to start sustainable fashion business, how to grow and increase their brand value? What advice would you give?
So I would say, take your time, you know, do the research. You know, the research phase is the phase that everyone skips, you know, because they're in a rush to get going with the product, you know, making it. But take plenty of time for that research phase, because that's like the foundation. It's like the soil into which you're going to plant the seed of your brand. And when you get that, when you do that research, everything else is just so much easier, particularly the marketing, because that research allows you to then, anything that you do, to position yourself as a brand on the market properly. And the market is so oversaturated that your brand positioning is key to success, because your brand positioning, if you get it right, and I'm not saying that you're going to be 100% right at the beginning, there's always going to be tweaking, and brand positioning is something that is a live, you know, entity. You always have to check the temperature and adjust it. But when you kind of have it almost right, or when you're spot on, etc., it just makes your design easier. It's easier for you to design. It's easier for you to find clients. It's easier to speak to them and make the sales. You know, everything is just easier. So I would just say, take your time.
That's wonderful. That's golden. So Dessy, tell us, how do people find you? You have a wealth of knowledge in development, and can you share your contacts? How do people find you? Where do people find you?
Well, so the main point of finding me is my website, www.fashioninsiders.co, not com, co. And then from there, it's everything. I'm on Instagram mostly. I have a podcast now, which is a good point of getting lots of information. We have a YouTube channel where, again, we have information. And we have some paid online courses that are, in my opinion, very good. So we have a course on manufacturing and on brand positioning, which are the 2 key components that would determine the success or failure, let's say, of a brand.
I love it, because you know what I found also recently, when I look into some of the university courses, what they teach about fashion, or maybe specifically sustainable fashion, or maybe like how do you launch a brand, between launching the brand into reality, there's such a gap there, because like there's just not that many courses that really does talk about launching, because university is mostly fundamental and theoretical. There are some of course practical, like designing, like some pattern making, how to use the software, so on and so forth. But how on earth do you launch a fashion brand? It's like something that I felt that university sometimes just doesn't.
They don't, because they mostly they're mostly run by academics, people who have gone into teaching because they can't make money somewhere else. And they're not from the industry, and the industry is changing. Everything is changing so much. So the advice on which they are teaching the students is already outdated. So that's a problem
too. And it's super generic.
yeah, it's super generic because they don't have the experience to be specific.
Yeah.
The other thing that I find is that because we all want our products to sell, and we have to find keywords that people are searching for, and therefore name our products, you know, and pages and everything with these keywords, that leads to even more dysfunctionality and miscommunication in the industry. Because, for example, startups who are looking for something, or new brands, they're looking how to launch my brand. Well, you won't be launching it. You know, I've recorded a podcast episode on how you should not use the word launch, because big brands launch. They're launching to an audience that's already there waiting for the next. Apple launches their new products, you know, to queues outside that sleep in tents outside their shops for that launch. When you're a new brand, you're just going live. You know, there's nothing to launch. You just switch on your website. And I think by using the right words, by not using launch, but using go live, makes the difference in expectations of people. Instead of crying, oh my God, I launched and no one's come into my website. If you just say, I switched on my website, now the work starts to bring people, traffic, sell, etc. So yeah, I think it's just very complex, and this whole clickbaiting. And I think that universities, because they have to get people to pay, they're having to use this, you know, keywords, this marketing terminology to get people to them, because nobody's going to pay for a course how to, you know, switch on your business.
Fantastic. Yeah. So for anyone who are interested to be in touch with Dessy, we will put some social handling, just the link right below. You will find her in the Fashion Insiders and code, and you will also be able to find her contact detail as well, and her online course. So thank you so much for your time, Dessy, to share your knowledge, your wealth of knowledge with us today. And we're really looking forward to be in touch with you in this industry again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.